the book of Jude. We started the book of Jude last week, and we got past who Jude is, the brother of James, who is actually the brother of Jesus. And we talked about the fact that he wanted us to contend for the faith, once and for all, laid down for the saints. And how surprising it was that that contention, that fight would be with Christian religious leaders. Because something is going on that Jude had to write this book. There are some Christian leaders that are misusing their place of, and we call it authority, but Jesus wouldn't call it authority, he would call it responsibility. He says later, he said they are shepherds who feed only themselves. Of course, we think of shepherds, we had our shepherds up here this morning, right? These are leaders in the church. And one of the things that they are doing is teaching that they are above any kind of moral law. So, let's start reading in verse 5. Though you already know all this, I want to remind you that the Lord delivered His people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their own home, these He has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They served as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. In the very same way, these dreamers pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and slander celestial beings. Okay. We've got some lessons from history here. Some of you recognize, right? He said, I know you guys know this stuff. So he assumed his readers, very Jewish in background, knew these stories. The first story was the Exodus. He said God brought them out of Egypt and then destroyed those who didn't believe. And if you remember that story, how many of the people who actually left Egypt got to go into the promised land? Well, we know two, right? Joshua and Caleb. The rest of them died in the wilderness. And they did some pretty weird things. Do you remember when they made the calf? Right? When Moses was up on the mountain and Aaron collected the gold, and he said he threw it in the furnace and it came out looking like this calf. You guys remember that story? And he said that they got up and they partied. And God was so angry with them. And Moses was so angry. Remember that he destroyed the tablets? You guys remember these stories, don't you? If not, hey, get out your Old Testament. There's some good reading going on back there. He said, okay, I want to remind you that story. And then he tells a story of the angels who abandoned their place of authority. And you guys know that story, right? No, you don't. I don't know it either, except that I have read the book of Enoch. This is a story from an intertestamental literature book called the Book of Enoch. And he's going to quote the Book of Enoch several times. So his audience, obviously, is up on the Book of Enoch. Makes for some interesting reading if you want to read. Okay? So, that one doesn't really call those. These angels are bound for everlasting chains. But you recognize the third one, don't you? Sodom and Gomorrah. You guys know that story. Of course, we derive words like Sodom from Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a place of wanton sinfulness. It was a place that was just about sexual activities. And if you remember the story, and it's an early story in the book of Genesis. Remember, Lot was living there, and the angels came to visit. And the men of Sodom said, hey, we want those guys that came to visit you. Hand them over. And Lot said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Instead, Lot gives them one of his daughters. And they abuse his daughter. And that's still not enough. They wanted those men who came to visit. And God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. In the same way, he says, these religious leaders, these dreamers, pollute their own bodies. We have some people in early Christianity here who are in positions of authority who are misusing their authority and taking advantage of people sexually. And Jude said, I got 3 stories to tell you about that, and all of them end pretty badly. Now, I don't know what it is about our human nature that does this, but anytime you use somebody sexually, you have created a lot of damage. God created sex to draw people closer, people in a committed relationship with each other, so they would know a faith-based relationship. They would know the security and love, and they would feel that intimacy and closeness. When sex is not used that way, it does damage. And there are people who do damage by randomly picking their sexual partners. There are people who do damage in the homosexual world by being homosexual offenders and doing damage to people who don't have those relationships. There are people who do damage by abusing children. There are people who do damage in so many ways. And they do damage to themselves and their victims. The important thing to remember about all this, guys, is it's not okay to damage anyone that Jesus died for. Jesus died for every one of us so we could learn to have that closeness, that faith-based relationship, to have those kind of secure, loving relationships that would teach us about what it meant to have a relationship with our Creator. That's why Jesus died. And if you destroy that, if you do damage to that, God is paying attention. And there's something about religion that allows people to think they're above that. I mean, not just Christianity. You think about early Judaism. Remember the story of Eli? Remember when Samuel came along? And Eli's sons were sleeping with the women who attended the, we'll actually call them the doors of the sanctuary. Right? Do you remember that story? Well, you guys are going to have to read your Old Testament. Early on. And this stuff went on. It's something about people who think that they are special spiritually, think that they are above such morality. And it happens over and over and over again. We've seen it, haven't we? Remember the thing in Waco where David thought he could sleep with anybody he wanted? That is a symptom of cults, mind control cults. They think that they get to the point that they are so special that they can just sleep with anybody they want. We've seen other religions that are now mainstream religions start with Christian leaders saying, you know, we're special and we can have more than one wife. Matter of fact, we can have your wife. It happens. It happens in small churches. It happens in large groups. And wait, our history, you ever heard of the Oneida colonies? Early American colony. It was an attempt, you remember Oneida, some of your Civil War says Oneida on it, right? Because they were tradesmen, they were silversmiths. And they tried to have this communal marriage situation. And this happened in your country And now we have one night of civil war. Okay. Over and over and over again, when somebody thinks that they are special, when they think that God has given them some special message or some special reason to be around, that they think that they can be above this kind of thing, and Jude says, no, 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 no. In case you didn't get that so far. Jesus died to make people whole. Amen. Jesus' desire is that you have secure, loving relationships, and you know what it means to have that secure, loving relationship with Him. It's not okay to mess up anybody, especially yourself, by saying that you are above that. That somehow your sexual mores, your sexual rules are above that. Wow. Encouraging message, huh? It's a reality. It's been a reality in the Christian faith since the beginning. In the first century, we had people who were shepherds looking only after themselves, thinking that they were above any kind of morality, and they were destroying people and destroying them spiritually. Never, 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 never okay. Never all right with God. Nobody, nobody, nobody is above the teachings on morality. Nobody. And if you've been hurt, maybe by somebody in an authority position, God can work with you and make you whole and teach you to trust again. But if you're in a relationship like that now, you need to get out. You can't stay in that kind of relationship and feel the closeness to your Creator that He wants you to have. You can't do it. Everybody is so precious in the sight of God. Everybody. And we talk about that every week when we take the Lord's Supper. Everybody. That sacrifice is for everybody. And we don't do damage to anyone. And we don't let it be done. Because Jesus died for you. You mean that much to Him. Your wholeness, your salvation means so much to your Creator that He came, became flesh, and died. Don't let anybody mess you up. Don't let anybody do damage to you spiritually. Okay? And if you have experienced that damage, then come to the one who can heal you. Jesus alone. God is God, nobody else. He can heal you. He can make you whole. He can give you that ability to have those trust-based relationships again. He can take away the past pains and the scars and the suffering, and He can make you new, make you whole if you let Him. Our shepherds are watching to make sure nobody damages the flock, that nobody damages the congregation, that nobody is doing damage in the name of Jesus, because they care about what Jesus has died for. Now, if we can take just that away from Jude, and we're not done with Jude, okay. But if we can just take those history lessons and remember how important we are, and remember that nobody is above those moral teachings of Jesus, then we've gained something, haven't we? And if we take that and we think about it while we take the Lord's Supper, and we think about Jesus making us whole despite the damage, and His care and concern for us and our ability to have that loving, close relationship with Him, then we've gained something.